They say in the Chicago underworld, weakness is a guaranteed death sentence. But what happens when the very trait society deems a weakness becomes your greatest impenetrable shield? She was the woman everyone looked past, the plus-sized auditor, sitting in the dimly lit corner of the office, mocked by the corporate elite and cruelly dismissed as too fat to matter. They didn't realize that behind those quiet, downcast eyes was a brilliant mind that missed absolutely nothing. When the city's most feared syndicate boss found himself drowning in a sea of Viper's internal betrayals and missing millions, it wasn't a hardened, ruthless assassin he turned to. It was her. This is a story of high-stakes deception, spilled blood, and an unlikely, dangerous romance that brought a mafia empire to its knees. Listen closely. The offices of Oakhaven Financial, perched on the 42nd floor of a sleek glass high-rise on Wacker Drive, were a temple of vanity and deceit. To the public, it was a prestigious wealth management firm handling the portfolios of Chicago's elite. To those who knew the dark underbelly of the city, it was the most sophisticated money laundering operation in the Midwest. Chloe Henderson knew exactly what Oakhaven was. She was their senior forensic accountant, a title that carried heavy responsibilities, but absolutely zero respect. Chloe was a brilliant mathematician, a woman who could trace a single misplaced cent through a labyrinth of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. But in the superficial world of Oakhaven, her intellect was entirely eclipsed by her dress size. At 240 pounds, Chloe was the constant silent victim of the firm's toxic culture. Her boss, a slick, morally bankrupt executive named Arthur Richards, routinely passed her over for promotions, handing them to women like Vanessa, a razor-thin, socially connected junior associate who barely knew how to balance a basic ledger. "Just put the Rossi files on my desk, Chloe, and try not to knock over the water cooler on your way out." Richards had sneered that very morning, prompting a chorus of hushed, cruel giggles from the open-plan bullpen. Chloe had simply adjusted her glasses, her cheeks burning with a familiar suppressed humiliation, and walked back to her cramped desk in the corner. She was used to it. Being too fat to matter meant she was practically invisible. People spoke openly around her. They left their computer screens unlocked. They made illicit phone calls assuming the heavy girl in the corner was too busy eating or feeling sorry for herself to pay attention. That assumption was their fatal mistake. For 3 weeks, Chloe had been quietly analyzing the accounts of their biggest, most terrifying client, Gabriel Rossi. Gabriel was the undisputed head of the Rossi syndicate. He was a ghost to the authorities, but a very real, very lethal presence to anyone who crossed him. And someone at Oakhaven was crossing him. Millions of dollars were quietly bleeding from his legitimate front companies, siphoned off in microtransactions that mimicked algorithmic trading losses. It was a masterpiece of embezzlement. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the temperature in the Oakhaven office plummeted. The elevator doors chimed, and Gabriel Rossi walked in. He wasn't flanked by a dozen thugs with Tommy guns like in the movies. He brought only 2 men, but the sheer radiating menace of his presence was enough to silence the entire floor. Gabriel was striking tall, broad-shouldered, impeccably dressed in a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit, with eyes as cold and grey as the Chicago sky outside. He marched straight into Richards's glass-walled office. Even from her corner, Chloe could see the blood drain from her boss's face. Mr. Rossi Richards stammered, standing up so fast his chair slammed into the credenza. "We weren't expecting you. Sit down." Arthur Gabriel's voice was smooth, deep, and carried a dangerous edge that bled right through the glass partitions. "I'm not here for pleasantries. $4 million is missing from the Falcone Imports escrow. I want it found. Now." Richard swallowed hard, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. "Ah, yes. We noticed a slight irregularity. It's a routing error, Gabriel. A glitch with the offshore servers. Vanessa is looking into it as we speak." He pointed a shaking finger at Vanessa, who froze in her designer heels, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror. She didn't know the first thing about the Falcone accounts. Gabriel turned slowly, his piercing grey eyes locking onto Vanessa. The silence in the office was deafening. "A glitch," Gabriel repeated softly. He stepped out of the office, approaching Vanessa's desk. "Show me this." "Glitch." Vanessa burst into tears, her manicured hands shaking violently over her keyboard. I don't," Mr. Richards said. "She doesn't know," a quiet, steady voice echoed through the frozen office. Every head snapped toward the corner. Chloe stood up, clutching a thick manila folder to her chest. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her voice didn't waver. "She doesn't know," Chloe repeated, stepping out from behind her desk. "Because it's not a server glitch. It's a deliberate manual rerouting through 3 phantom LLCs registered in Delaware, authorized by executive clearance." Richards bolted out of his office, his face purple with rage. "Chloe, shut your mouth. Get back to your desk, you stupid cow. You have no idea what you're talking about." Gabriel held up a single gloved hand. Richards snapped his mouth shut instantly. Gabriel's predatory gaze shifted from the furious executive to the trembling plus-sized woman standing bravely in the aisle. He walked toward her, his footsteps eerily silent on the carpet. He stopped mere inches away, towering over her. Chloe braced herself, expecting violence, or at least the disgust she was so used to seeing in men's eyes. Instead, she saw intense, burning curiosity. "And you are?" Gabriel asked, his voice dropping to a low rumble meant only for her. "Chloe Henderson, senior forensic accountant." She handed him the folder. "I tracked the missing $4 million. It didn't bounce off an offshore server. It was wired into a private domestic account held under a pseudonym. The authorization code belongs to Arthur Richards." The gasp that swept through the office was instantaneous. Richards lunged forward. "She's lying. She's a bitter, pathetic joke," who before Richards could take another step, one of Gabriel's men intercepted him, driving a fist so hard into the executive's stomach that Richards collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. Gabriel didn't even look at Richards. He opened the folder, his eyes scanning the meticulous, flawlessly highlighted spreadsheets Chloe had prepared. After a long, tense minute, he snapped the folder shut. "Get your coat, Miss Henderson," Gabriel commanded, his tone leaving absolutely no room for debate. Ooh, what?" Why, Chloe asked, her bravado suddenly evaporating. "Because Arthur here is going to have a very long, very painful conversation with my associates regarding my money," Gabriel said, finally glancing down at the wheezing executive. Then he looked back at Chloe, his eyes softening just a fraction. "And you are the only person in this building who isn't lying to me. You work for me now." As Chloe walked toward the elevator, flanked by the city's most dangerous man, she caught the stunned, horrified faces of her co-workers. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. Gabriel's estate was a sprawling, fortress-like mansion, hidden behind heavy iron gates on the affluent north shore of Chicago. It was a world of imported marble, priceless art, and lethal secrets. When Chloe stepped through the heavy oak double doors still clutching her worn briefcase, she felt entirely out of place. She pulled her oversized cardigan tighter around her, acutely aware of her soft, unmanicured appearance amidst the extravagant luxury. Her arrival did not go unnoticed. As Gabriel led her into the grand foyer, they were met by Lorenzo Gabriel's underboss and oldest friend. Lorenzo was sharp, handsome, and carried a permanent smirk that made Chloe's skin crawl. Standing next to him was Sophia, a stunning, statuesque woman with raven hair and a silk dress that clung to her impossibly thin frame. Sophia managed Gabriel's legitimate PR and hospitality fronts, but her ambition was an open secret. Sophia's eyes raked over Chloe, lingering on her wide hips and thick thighs before landing on her sensible scuffed loafers. A cruel, mocking smile stretched across Sophia's perfect lips. "Gabriel, darling," Sophia purred, stepping forward to kiss his cheek. "You didn't tell me we were hiring a new kitchen maid." Or did she simply eat the actual accountant on the way here? Lorenzo chuckled a dry, raspy sound. Chloe looked down at her shoes, the familiar sting of tears pricking her eyes. She prepared to shrink back into herself, to become the punchline she had always been. "Watch your mouth, Sophia." Gabriel's voice cracked like a whip echoing off the vaulted ceiling. The temperature in the room plummeted. Sophia froze, her smile shattering. I was only joking, Gabriel. I don't pay you to make jokes. I pay you to manage the clubs." Gabriel stepped between Sophia and Chloe, effectively shielding Chloe with his broad back. "This is Miss Henderson. She is my new chief financial auditor. She will be treated with the exact same respect you would show me. If I hear a single word of disrespect regarding her presence, her work, or her appearance, I will have your tongue cut out. Do I make myself clear?" Lorenzo stopped smiling immediately. Sophia swallowed hard, her face pale. "Crystal Gabriel." Gabriel turned to Chloe, his harsh demeanor instantly evaporating, replaced by a surprising gentleness. "Follow me, Chloe. I'll show you your office." He led her to a massive mahogany-paneled library overlooking the churning waters of Lake Michigan. It was a bibliophile's dream, filled with floor-to-ceiling books, a roaring fireplace, and a massive antique desk preloaded with top-of-the-line secure servers and monitors. "Richards confessed before my men even broke his second finger," Gabriel said, leaning against the doorframe. "He took the $4 million. But he's a coward. He doesn't have the brains to set up the Delaware LLCs, and he certainly doesn't have the spine to steal from me unless someone more terrifying was holding his leash." "You think someone inside your organization put him up to it?" Chloe deduced, setting her briefcase on the desk. Gabriel nodded slowly, his eyes locking onto hers. "I know they did. The Rossi Syndicate is bleeding, Chloe. Someone in my inner circle is preparing to make a move against me, and they are funding their coup with my own money. I need you to find the rot, trace every dime, trust no one but me." And so began the forced proximity that would alter the course of both their lives. For the next 2 weeks, Chloe practically lived in the library. She dove into the syndicate's sprawling financial network, a terrifying web of casinos, shipping routes, construction companies, and political bribes. It was a colossal, dangerous puzzle, and Chloe was a savant. But it wasn't the work that consumed her thoughts. It was Gabriel. He was a paradox, a ruthless mob boss who ordered violence with a flick of his wrist, yet with her he was attentive, patient, and deeply respectful. He didn't treat her like a fragile object, nor did he treat her like a burden. He treated her like an intellectual equal. Late at night, when the mansion fell silent, Gabriel would join her in the library. He never came empty-handed. While her former colleagues used to leave mocking notes on her desk, if she ate a pastry, Gabriel brought her comfort. Realizing she was working through dinner, he began having his personal chef prepare late-night meals. Not meager salads, but rich, incredible food. One night it was a massive, steaming, deep-dish pizza from Lou Malnati's. Another night, a perfectly seared ribeye from Gibson's Bar and Steakhouse. "You need fuel," he told her one evening, setting down a plate of homemade lasagna. He pulled up a chair across from her, rolling up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, revealing heavily tattooed forearms. "I probably don't need this much fuel. Chloe muttered, a sudden wave of self-consciousness hitting her. She gestured vaguely at her body. I'm already... well, you know. Gabriel stopped pouring the wine. He set the bottle down and looked at her, his gaze so intense it made her breath catch. I know that you are brilliant, Gabriel said quietly. I know that you saved me $4 million. And I know that in a world full of fake, starving, treacherous snakes, you are the most real, substantial thing I have ever encountered. He leaned across the desk. Do not ever apologize for taking up space in my house, Chloe. Understood. Chloe felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she quickly wiped it away, nodding. In that quiet, fire-lit room, the terrifying Mafia Don was systematically dismantling decades of her deep-seated insecurities. But outside the heavy oak doors, the vipers were circling. Chloe was getting closer to the truth. She had traced the phantom LLCs back to a holding company in Panama. But she needed one final piece of the puzzle, a master ledger that wasn't digitized. A physical book kept in the syndicate's downtown safe house. I need to go to the vault at the Roosevelt property, Chloe told Gabriel the next morning. Gabriel frowned. It's risky. But if that's where the proof is, I'll take you myself. They didn't know that Lorenzo was standing just outside the library door, listening to every word. The tension in the North Shore estate grew suffocating as the days passed. Chloe could feel the hostile glares burning into her back whenever Gabriel wasn't looking. Sophia's whispers in the corridors ceased the moment Chloe walked by. The men guarding the perimeter seemed to watch her with a little too much scrutiny. Someone knew she was close. The first warning was subtle. Chloe walked out to her modest, sensible sedan parked in the estate's secondary lot, intending to grab a notebook she had left in the glove compartment. She stopped dead in her tracks. The driver's side front tire was slashed, not punctured by a nail, but violently gutted with a hunting knife. Pinned beneath the windshield wiper was a single crisp $100 bill. Take the money and run or bleed out. The message couldn't have been clearer. Panic flared in her chest, but it was quickly swallowed by a sudden fierce anger. All her life, people had bullied her, pushed her around, and expected her to cower because she was soft and heavy. But Chloe was done cowering. She marched straight back into the mansion, ignoring the smirking guards, and walked into Gabriel's study. She slammed the $100 bill onto his mahogany desk. Gabriel looked up from his phone, his eyes narrowing at the slashed tire grease on her hands. What happened? Someone in your camp thinks I scare easily, Chloe said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. They slashed my tire. They want me gone before I crack the Panama accounts. Gabriel's face turned into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. He stood up the chair, scraping violently against the hardwood. He didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He walked around the desk, took her trembling, grease-stained hands in his, and looked her dead in the eye. Pack a bag. You aren't sleeping in the guest wing anymore. You're moving into the master suite adjacent to mine. No one breathes near you without my permission. Gabriel vowed his thumb, gently wiping a smudge of dirt from her knuckles. The proximity, the raw protectiveness in his voice sent a jolt of electricity straight to Chloe's heart. Did you figure out who holds the Panama accounts? I'm one decryption key away. Chloe admitted, her heart hammering. The final transfer of funds, the money they're using to fund the coup against you, is hidden under a vendor payment for the St. Jude charity gala tonight. They disguised an $8 million wire transfer to a security firm out of Boston. Gabriel, the security firm doesn't exist. It's an escrow account for the Moretti family. Gabriel's jaw clenched. The Morettis were his most vicious rivals. If someone inside his crew was paying the Morettis $8 million, it wasn't for peace. It was a bounty. A hit. The gala, Gabriel murmured, staring out the window. Lorenzo insisted I attend tonight. He said it was crucial for the family's public image. Chloe felt the blood drain from her face. Lorenzo. He's the underboss. He has the executive clearance. He knew the routing numbers. We need absolute proof before I put a bullet in my oldest friend's head, Gabriel said grimly. The decryption key is on Lorenzo's personal phone. He'll have it on him at the gala tonight. You're coming with me? Chloe balked, looking down at herself. Gabriel, I can't go to a high society charity gala. I don't fit in. I don't have anything to wear. The women there, Sophia will be there. They'll eat me alive. Gabriel reached out, lifting her chin so she was forced to look at him. Let them try. You are walking in on my arm. You are the most important person in that room. Leave the dress to me. 4 hours later, Chloe stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master suite, entirely speechless. Gabriel had called in a team of elite stylists. They hadn't tried to squeeze her into something she wasn't. They hadn't hidden her body under shapeless fabric. Instead, she was draped in a breathtaking custom-tailored emerald green velvet gown that hugged her curves flawlessly. The deep V-neck accentuated her collarbones, and a tasteful slit allowed her to move with grace. Her hair was styled in soft vintage waves, and a delicate diamond choker rested on her neck. She looked beautiful, powerful, lethal in her own right. When she walked down the grand staircase, Gabriel was waiting in a classic black tuxedo. He stopped mid-sentence, ignoring Lorenzo, who was speaking to him. Gabriel's eyes swept over Chloe, raw awe and burning hunger flashing in his gaze before he masked it with his usual stoicism. He stepped forward, offering his arm. You look phenomenal, he whispered, pressing a light kiss to the back of her hand. At the Drake Hotel, the gala was a sea of sparkling diamonds, clinking champagne flutes and deadly secrets. True to form, the moment Chloe entered on Gabriel's arm, the whispers began. The elite of Chicago's underworld and high society stared. Sophia, clad in a sheer silver dress, almost dropped her drink. She sneered, leaning in to whisper to Lorenzo, but Gabriel leveled a look at them so terrifying that the words died in Sophia's throat. Stay close, Gabriel murmured, guiding Chloe through the ballroom. Their objective was simple. Get Lorenzo's phone. Chloe knew Lorenzo was arrogant. He would leave it on the table when he went to the bar. She just needed a 3-minute window to plug the device into a discreet USB cloner hidden in her clutch. Halfway through the evening, the opportunity arose. Lorenzo left his jacket draped over his chair and headed for the private smoking balcony. Gabriel distracted Sophia, leaving Chloe at the table. With shaking hands, Chloe slipped the phone from Lorenzo's pocket. She plugged in the cloner. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The data transferred. She slipped the phone back just as Lorenzo returned, looking flushed and nervous. Got it, Chloe whispered to Gabriel as he returned to her side. Good, let's get out of here, Gabriel said, his hand resting securely on the small of her back. But as they moved toward the exit, Chloe discreetly checked the cloned data on her own hidden screen. The decryption key unlocked the Panama ledger. The $8 million payment to the Moretti hit squad hadn't just been authorized. It had cleared 10 minutes ago. A secondary message translated from a numerical cipher glowed ominously on her screen. Package drops at the Drake exit. 10:45 p.m. Chloe checked the grandfather clock in the foyer. It was 10:44 p.m. Gabriel, stop! Chloe gasped, grabbing his lapel and violently yanking him backward, just as they reached the revolving glass doors of the hotel lobby. Chloe, what? Crack the heavy glass door, directly where Gabriel's head had been, a fraction of a second prior, shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. A high-caliber sniper bullet embedded itself into the marble pillar behind them, sending stone shrapnel flying. Screams erupted in the lobby. Chaos reigned. Gabriel reacted with terrifying speed, tackling Chloe to the floor and covering her body with his own as his guards drew their weapons and surged forward. "Sniper North Roof," Lorenzo yelled, drawing his own weapon, acting the part of the loyal soldier perfectly. But Chloe, pinned beneath the heavy protective weight of the Mafia boss, looked up and caught Lorenzo's eye. Lorenzo saw the blinking USB cloner in her hand. The blood drained from the underboss's face as he realized his plot had failed. Gabriel pulled Chloe up, dragging her behind the safety of a thick marble fountain. He checked her over frantically, his hands roaming her arms, his eyes wild with a fear she had never seen in him before. "Are you hit, Chloe? Talk to me. Are you hit?" "I'm fine," she breathed, clutching his jacket, her heart soaring despite the gunfire outside. "I'm fine. But Gabriel, the payment cleared. It was Lorenzo." He signaled the hit. Gabriel looked at the data on her small screen. The ultimate proof of betrayal. He looked from the screen up to the terrified, brilliant woman who had just risked her life to pull him out of the crosshairs. In that chaotic, blood-soaked lobby surrounded by enemies and noise, Gabriel Rossi realized the absolute truth. His wealth, his soldiers, his reputation, none of it mattered. The only person in the world he could truly trust, the only person who saw the man beneath the monster, was the woman society had cruelly written off. Gabriel pulled Chloe flush against his chest, pressing a fierce, desperate kiss into her hair. "Stay behind me," he growled, drawing his sidearm, a lethal promise glowing in his eyes. "I'm going to kill him, and then I'm taking you home." The roar of the armored SUV's engine was the only sound cutting through the heavy silence of the cabin. Outside the tinted bulletproof windows, the neon lights of downtown Chicago blurred into streaks of rain and adrenaline. In the back seat, Chloe sat frozen, the remnants of shattered glass still dusting the hem of her ruined emerald gown. Her ears rang a high, piercing note, a residual echo from the sniper's rifle. Beside her, Gabriel was a coiled spring of lethal intent. He was on a burner phone, barking rapid-fire orders in a low, terrifying growl. "I want the Drake locked down. I want every camera feed within a 6-block radius scrubbed and sent to my servers. And find Lorenzo. If he makes it to the Moretti compound in Little Italy, I'll burn the whole neighborhood to the ground." He snapped the phone in half and tossed it onto the floorboard. He turned to Chloe. The raw fury in his eyes instantly melted into profound anxiety. He reached out his large hands, gently framing her face, his thumbs sweeping across her cheekbones. "Look at me, Chloe," he commanded softly. "Breathe. You're hyperventilating." She hadn't even realized she was gasping for air. He was standing right next to us. Lorenzo. He was going to watch you die, and then he was going to step over your body. "He missed," Gabriel stated, his voice a steady grounding anchor in the storm of her panic. "Because of you. You saved my life." "Where are we going?" she asked, clutching his jacket so tightly her knuckles were white. "We can't go back to the North Shore estate. If Lorenzo is compromised, he knows the security protocols. He knows the blind spots." Gabriel's lips twitched into a grim, deeply impressed smile. "You just survived an assassination attempt, and you're already calculating tactical disadvantages. You are a marvel, Chloe." He tapped the glass dividing them from his driver. "Change of plans, Leo. We aren't going home. Take us to the Rookery." The Rookery wasn't a mansion. It was a brutalist, heavily fortified penthouse occupying the entire top floor of a seemingly abandoned industrial building in the West Loop. It had no windows facing the street, reinforced steel doors, and a private freight elevator requiring biometric access. It was Gabriel's absolute last resort. Once inside, the heavy steel door slammed shut, locking with a definitive mechanical thud that echoed through the cavernous space. Gabriel shed his tuxedo jacket, tossing it over a leather sofa, and walked straight to a massive gun safe embedded in the concrete wall. Chloe stood in the center of the room, shivering despite the heat of the apartment. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving behind a cold, hollow terror. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, suddenly hyper-aware of her body, of how out of place she was in this world of blood and steel. She was an accountant, a girl who was bullied for eating a donut in the break room. Now she was the prime target in a mafia war. Gabriel turned around, an assault rifle slung over his shoulder, and saw her trembling. He crossed the room in 3 strides, abandoned his weapons on a glass table, and pulled her into his chest. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair, his arms wrapping entirely around her full figure, holding her tight against his rapidly beating heart. "I will tear this city apart, brick by brick, before I let a single piece of shrapnel touch you again." For the first time since the gunshot rang out, Chloe cried. She buried her face in his chest, her tears soaking into his crisp white shirt. He didn't shush her or tell her to be brave. He just held her, a monolithic protector in a world gone mad. When her tears finally slowed, she pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm usually more composed. You have nothing to apologize for," Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion. He walked into the master bedroom and returned with a pair of soft grey sweatpants and a black t-shirt. "Change out of the dress. There's a bathroom down the hall. Then we need to talk strategy. Because you were right in the car, Lorenzo knows everything." 10 minutes later, Chloe emerged. Gabriel's t-shirt draped loosely over her curves, and she had rolled the waistband of the sweatpants. She felt significantly more like herself. She found Gabriel standing in front of a bank of monitors in the living room, pouring 2 glasses of amber liquid. He handed her a bourbon. "Lorenzo was my underboss for 8 years, Gabriel said, staring blankly at the dark screens. "He knows my offshore routes. He knows the judges I have on payroll. He knows the exact vulnerability of our legitimate businesses. The Morettis didn't just buy a hit tonight. They bought the keys to my entire empire." Chloe took a burning sip of the bourbon, letting the fire clear her mind. The brilliant, analytical side of her brain, the side that saw numbers as living, breathing entities, woke up. "They have the keys, but they haven't turned the lock yet," Chloe said, stepping up to the monitors. "Gabriel, think about it. Lorenzo paid them $8 million tonight. The Morettis are a street crew. They deal in extortion, narcotics, and dock rackets. They don't have the sophisticated financial infrastructure to immediately absorb your corporate assets. They have to move your money through Lorenzo." Gabriel turned to look at her, his brow furrowed. "Go on." "Lorenzo needs time to reroute the accounts. He thinks I'm a dead woman, which means he assumes no one left in your organization understands the Panama ledger. He'll wait until the banks open on Monday to finalize the hostile takeover of your real estate and shipping companies." Chloe set her glass down and logged into the secure terminal. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, bringing up the syndicate's global financial web. "We don't need to fight them in the streets, Gabriel," Chloe said, her voice dropping into a register of cold, absolute certainty. "If you send your men to Little Italy, it'll be a bloodbath. Cops fed civilian casualties. It's what Lorenzo wants. He wants you distracted by a turf war. What are you suggesting?" Gabriel asked, stepping close behind her, his chest brushing her back. "I'm suggesting we bleed them dry." Chloe turned her head to look up at him, her eyes flashing with a ruthless intelligence that mirrored his own. "Lorenzo thinks he locked me out, but he's arrogant. He doesn't write his own code. I do. Give me 48 hours and I won't just secure your money. I will build a trap door into the Moretti family's accounts. When Lorenzo tries to pull your funds, he won't just fail. He'll trigger an automated hemorrhage that will drain every single cent the Morettis have, directly into a frozen federal lockbox. Gabriel stared at her, utterly captivated. This woman, the one the world had discarded as too fat to matter, was currently weaponizing the global financial system to decimate a rival mafia family. "Do it," Gabriel ordered. "I'll buy you the time. I'll keep Lorenzo's hitters busy." For 2 days, the rookery was a command center of controlled chaos. Gabriel mobilized his loyal captains, coordinating phantom strikes and false intelligence leaks across Chicago to keep the Morettis panicked and looking in the wrong direction. Meanwhile, Chloe existed purely on black coffee and adrenaline. She sat bathed in the blue glow of the monitors, weaving a digital snare so complex it would make Wall Street quants weep. She set up dozens of dummy corporations, masking them with algorithmic mirrors. She was building a financial guillotine. But the tension was taking its toll. On Saturday evening, the secure elevator hummed to life. Gabriel's men had strict orders not to let anyone up, so both Gabriel and Chloe tensed, weapons drawn. The steel doors slid open, revealing Sophia. She looked immaculate as always, draped in an expensive trench coat, flanked by 2 of Gabriel's guards, who looked thoroughly apologetic. "I had to pull a gun on Leo downstairs to get him to swipe me up," Sophia said, brushing past the guards as if entering a cocktail party. "Gabriel, the clubs are panicking. The police are asking questions about the Drake shooting. You need to come down and manage the narrative." Gabriel lowered his weapon, his expression turning to stone. "You defied a direct lockdown order, Sophia. Because you're hiding in a warehouse with her," Sophia spat, turning her vitriol toward Chloe, who was sitting at the computer terminal in Gabriel's oversized clothes. Sophia laughed, a sharp, cruel sound. "Is this what the great Gabriel Rossi has resorted to? Taking military strategy from a plus-sized bean counter who can't even fit into a proper dress? The streets are laughing at you, Gabriel. Lorenzo told the Morettis that you are whipped by a woman who takes up 2 seats on a bus." The words hit Chloe like physical blows. The familiar, crushing weight of lifelong humiliation rushed back in. She looked down at her thighs, at the soft curve of her stomach beneath the t-shirt. She suddenly felt disgusting, foolish for ever thinking she could exist in Gabriel's world. Before Chloe could shrink away, Gabriel moved. He didn't yell. He didn't strike Sophia. He simply closed the distance between them, grabbed Sophia by the throat of her expensive trench coat, and slammed her violently against the concrete wall. "Gabriel!" Sophia gasped, her perfectly manicured hands clawing at his wrists. "You are nothing!" Gabriel whispered, his voice a demonic hiss. "You manage nightclubs because you have a pretty face and 0 intellectual substance. You are a parasite. Chloe has more value, more brilliance, and more beauty in a single strand of her hair than you will ever possess in your entire hollow, pathetic life." He released her, and Sophia crumpled to the floor, gasping for breath, her eyes wide with genuine terror. "You are stripped of your fronts," Gabriel commanded. "You are stripped of your protection. The only reason you are leaving this room alive is because Chloe is watching. Get out of my sight. If I ever see you in Chicago again, they won't find enough of you to bury." Sophia scrambled backward, terrified, and bolted into the elevator, the doors sliding shut on her sobbing face. Silence descended on the apartment again. Gabriel took a slow, deep breath, smoothing his expression, before turning to face Chloe. She was staring at the keyboard tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Gabriel crossed the room, pulling her chair away from the monitors. He knelt in front of her, a man who commanded thousands, bowing before a woman who had never commanded anything but spreadsheets. "Look at me," he pleaded gently. She shook her head, hiding her face in her hands. "She's right. I'm a joke to them, to Lorenzo, to your whole world. I'm just the fat girl playing mobster." Gabriel gently but firmly pulled her hands away from her face. "Listen to me very carefully," he said, his grey eyes burning with fierce, uncompromising devotion. "I have lived my entire life surrounded by beautiful, thin, treacherous women. They are empty. They would sell my soul for a designer handbag. And then there is you." He ran his hands up her thighs, over the flare of her hips, his touch reverent and burning hot. Chloe gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "I look at you," Gabriel murmured, his thumbs tracing the soft curve of her waist beneath the cotton shirt. "And I see a goddess. I see a woman who didn't flinch when a bullet shattered glass an inch from her head. I see a mind that brings empires to their knees. And I see a body that drives me absolutely out of my mind with want." "Gabriel," she whispered, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I don't want bone and sharp edges, Chloe. I want you, exactly as you are. Every soft curve, every inch. You are my queen. Do you understand me? You are the only thing in this world that matters to me." He leaned up and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was a claiming, desperate kiss, tasting of bourbon and absolute devotion. Chloe melted into him, all her insecurities, burning away in the heat of his desire. When his hand slipped beneath her shirt, mapping her skin with worshipful strokes, she didn't hide. For the first time in her life, she felt entirely flawlessly beautiful. But the war wasn't over. The next morning, Monday, the financial markets opened. Chloe sat at the terminal, Gabriel standing behind her, his hands resting heavily on her shoulders. The digital clock struck 9 a.m. "Here we go," Chloe whispered. On the screen, a flurry of green code cascaded down the terminal. Lorenzo had taken the bait. Thinking he had the decryption keys, he initiated the transfer protocol attempting to siphon $300 million in legitimate Rossi assets into the Moretti family's shadow accounts. "He's in," Chloe said, her fingers hovering over the enter key. "He thinks he's bypassing the firewall." "Spring the trap," Gabriel ordered smoothly. Chloe slammed the enter key. The screens flashed violent red. The poison pill protocol activated. Not only did Lorenzo's transfer fail, but the back door Chloe had coded slammed shut behind him. The malicious algorithm aggressively reversed the current, violently attaching itself to the Moretti's root accounts. Gabriel and Chloe watched in stunned silence as the numbers on the screen plummeted. The Moretti family's offshore havens, their slush funds, their bribery accounts. Everything was systematically drained. "Where is it going?" Gabriel asked, a feral grin spreading across his face. "I routed it through a decentralized tumbler." Chloe smiled, a wicked, brilliant expression. Half of it just vanished into anonymous crypto wallets that even the NSA couldn't trace. The other half was anonymously wired to the Chicago FBI field office under Lorenzo's name, flagged as terror funding evidence. Gabriel threw his head back and laughed, a rich, dark sound of pure victory. "You just bankrupted the most dangerous family in the Midwest and framed the man who tried to kill me all before finishing your morning coffee." He pulled her out of the chair, spinning her around and kissing her deeply. They had won. The corporate war was over before a single shot was fired on the streets. But as Gabriel set her down, a blaring alarm echoed through the penthouse. The biometric security feed on the secondary monitor flared to life. Chloe's blood ran cold. On the screen, the reinforced steel doors of the ground floor lobby had been blown off their hinges by C4. Marching through the smoke were a dozen heavily armed men. And leading them, his face twisted in a mask of desperate, murderous rage, was Lorenzo. He didn't wait for the markets to clear. He hadn't trusted the digital heist. Lorenzo had tracked Sophia's phone signal the night before, leading him straight to the rookery. "Gabriel." Chloe choked out, pointing at the monitor. Gabriel looked at the screen. The joy vanished from his face, replaced by the cold, dead eyes of a killer. He racked the slide of his assault rifle. "Get into the vault," Gabriel ordered, pushing her toward the massive steel safe in the wall. "Do not come out until I tell you to." "Gabriel, there are 12 of them. You can't—" "I said get in the vault!" he roared, shoving her inside the steel room and hitting the locking mechanism. The heavy door swung shut, sealing Chloe in darkness, leaving her only with the muffled, terrifying sound of heavy boots echoing up the elevator shaft, coming to kill the man she loved. Inside the reinforced steel vault, the darkness was absolute. Chloe fell to her knees, her hands pressing hard over her ears as the muffled, rhythmic thud of automatic gunfire vibrated through the floorboards. Every gunshot was a physical blow to her heart. She imagined Gabriel out there alone, a solitary king defending a shattered castle against 12 heavily armed men. But Chloe Henderson was done hiding in the dark. She felt along the cold steel walls until her hands brushed against a secondary emergency power panel. The vault wasn't just a safe, it was a panic room. She popped the metal cover and ripped out the emergency flashlight, flicking it on. The beam illuminated a dusty offline terminal used to manually override the penthouse's internal systems. She booted it up. Her hands were shaking violently, but her mind was terrifyingly clear. She couldn't shoot a gun, but she could weaponize the building. Outside in the living room, the rookery had become a war zone. Gabriel was a phantom, utilizing the heavy concrete pillars and Kevlar-reinforced furniture to systematically dismantle Lorenzo's strike team. He dropped 3 men in the hallway, another 2 by the kitchen island, his movements precise and ruthlessly efficient. But he was outgunned. A bullet grazed his ribs, tearing through his shirt and sending a spray of blood against the wall. Gabriel grunted, diving behind the massive mahogany dining table, just as a hail of bullets shredded the wood above his head. "It's over, Gabriel." Lorenzo's voice echoed through the smoke-filled room. He was hiding near the elevator bank, using his remaining men as human shields. "The accounts are frozen. You have nothing left. Give me the girl and the decryption keys and I'll make your death quick." Gabriel reloaded his rifle, his eyes locked on the vault door. He would die before Lorenzo took a single step toward her. Suddenly the penthouse plunged into pitch blackness. Inside the vault, Chloe had hacked the mainframe. She didn't just cut the lights. She triggered the rookery's internal hazard protocols. A deafening high-pitched alarm shattered the air, disorienting Lorenzo's men. Then the ceiling vents blasted open, flooding the living room with thick, blinding halon gas meant to extinguish fires. "What the hell is this? Shoot him!" Lorenzo screamed, coughing violently as the white fog swallowed the room. Gabriel, knowing the layout of his own home by heart, moved through the blinding fog like a predator. He neutralized 3 more of Lorenzo's men in the confusion, leaving only Lorenzo and his 2 closest hitters. But Gabriel's luck ran out. As he rounded the corner, Lorenzo fired blindly. A bullet caught Gabriel in the thigh. He collapsed to the floor, his rifle sliding out of reach. Lorenzo stepped out of the dissipating smoke, his gun leveled directly at Gabriel's head. A victorious, ugly sneer twisted his face. So much for the great Don Rossi, beaten by his own underboss. "You haven't beaten anyone, Lorenzo," Gabriel rasped, gripping his bleeding leg, his eyes filled with dark, mocking amusement. "Check your watch." Lorenzo frowned. What before Lorenzo could pull the trigger? The reinforced windows of the penthouse windows, deemed entirely bulletproof, shattered inward in a spectacular explosion of glass and steel. The deafening roar of a Black Hawk helicopter filled the air. "FBI hostage rescue team, drop your weapons. Drop your weapons now." Dozens of heavily armored tactical agents repelled through the shattered windows and breached the stairwell simultaneously. Red laser sights painted Lorenzo's chest like a swarm of angry hornets. Lorenzo dropped his gun, his face draining of all color. He fell to his knees as the feds swarmed him. Gabriel leaned back against the wall, a bloody, exhausted smile gracing his lips. Chloe hadn't just sent the stolen Moretti money to the FBI field office at the Dirksen Federal Building. Using the cloned phone data, she had attached Lorenzo's live GPS coordinates to the transfer, flagging him as an active armed domestic terrorist holding hostages in the West Loop. She had essentially ordered a federal airstrike right onto Lorenzo's head. The heavy vault door clicked and swung open. Chloe emerged, her eyes wide, as she took in the ruined apartment, the federal agents, and finally Gabriel. Ignoring the screaming FBI agents securing the perimeter, she ran across the glass-covered floor and dropped to her knees beside him. "Gabriel, you're shot." "I've had worse," he murmured, his bloody hand reaching up to cup her cheek. He pulled her down, pressing his forehead against hers. "Remind me never to play chess with you, Miss Henderson." 6 months later, the Chicago skyline glittered like a sea of diamonds against the night sky. The underworld had been entirely restructured, with Lorenzo facing multiple consecutive life sentences in federal prison for wire fraud and domestic terrorism, and the Moretti family bankrupt and scattered. The Rossi syndicate had a complete monopoly. But it wasn't the same syndicate. Gabriel had kept his promise. They didn't operate in the shadows with blood and extortion anymore. Guided by Chloe's unparalleled financial genius, the Rossi empire had aggressively transitioned into legitimate corporate dominance. They owned real estate, international shipping, and massive tech firm holdings. They were untouchable, and it was entirely legal. The private dining room at Gibson's Italia was reserved exclusively for them. Gabriel sat at the head of the table, dressed in a sharp, midnight blue tuxedo, a silver cane resting against his chair, the only lingering sign of the gunfight at the Rookery. The heavy mahogany doors opened, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. Chloe walked in. She was no longer the shrinking, invisible woman hiding behind oversized cardigans. She wore a stunning, custom-draped crimson gown that celebrated every single curve of her body. Her hair cascaded in dark, elegant waves, and a flawless 2-carat diamond rested on her left ring finger. The confidence radiating from her was palpable. She was a woman who had faced down assassins and federal agencies and won. Gabriel stood up, his eyes darkening with that familiar, intense hunger that he reserved only for her. He walked over, offering his arm, and kissed her deeply, uncaring of the waitstaff or his security detail standing by the doors. "You're late, Mrs. Rossi," he murmured against her lips. "I was finalizing the acquisition of the Oakhaven Financial Building." Chloe smiled, her eyes sparkling with wicked triumph. "I fired Arthur Richards personally. I told him his severance package was lost in a routing error." Gabriel threw his head back and laughed, the sound rich and full of genuine joy. He pulled out her chair, seating her with the utmost reverence. As they looked out over the sprawling city, a city they now jointly ruled, Gabriel reached across the table and took her hand. "They used to mock you," Gabriel said quietly, his thumb brushing over her wedding band. "They called you invisible. They thought you were too soft for this world." "They were wrong," Chloe said, her voice steady and powerful. She squeezed his hand, looking into the eyes of the ruthless mafia boss who had seen her worth when no one else would. "They were dead wrong," Gabriel agreed, raising his glass of champagne. "To the Queen of Chicago, the only woman I will ever trust. The only woman I will ever love." Chloe clinked her glass against his. She had entered his world as an overlooked, plus-sized accountant, but she was leaving it as a legend. She wasn't just the woman beside the throne. She was the one who built it. Did Chloe and Gabriel's story keep you on the edge of your seat? This tale proves that true power doesn't come from fitting into society's narrow molds. It comes from undeniable brilliance, unshakable confidence, and finding the one person who sees your worth when the rest of the world is blind. If you loved watching Chloe transform from an overlooked accountant into the brilliant, untouchable queen of the Chicago underworld,